Nevada volunteers, please use it, in conjunction with your grant agreement, as a guide for report deadlines and changes to your program. You should always contact your program contact, listed below, directly for programmatic and fiscal concerns. Important deadlines period grant progress report, GPR, AFR and program income report unexpended funds report proof of data quality spreadsheet due date mid-year reporting, September the 1st of February 28th, final report, March 1st, August 31st, yes, no, yes, 4/15/2022, no, October 15th, 2022, June 1st, 2022, no cost extension. No cost extensions should be requested 90 days before the end of the grant to ensure deadlines are met. Grant closeout must be completed annually 60 days after the end of the grant period. Periodic expense reports, PERS, are due on the 10th and 25th of the month, or next workday, each month. Program Director Call Schedule required program director calls being held on the 3 and D Tuesday of the month at 10 a.m. unless other training has been scheduled. Please contact Nevada volunteers 3 working days before the call if you would like to add an agenda item. September 21st, 2021, October 19th, 2021, November 16th, 2021, January 18th, 2022, February 15th, 2022, March 15th, 2022, April 19th, 2022, May 17th, 2022. Important AmeriCorps dates 9 to 11 day of service. September 11th, 2021 Governor's Points of Light Awards. October 14th, 2021, Las Vegas, NV MLK Day of Service. January 17th, 2022 AmeriCorps Week. TBD March, 2022 National Service Recognition Day. April 5th, 2022 Volunteer Week. April 17, 2022 ASC Southwestern Pacific Training Conference. June 1-3, 2022 Albuquerque, NM, Nevada Volunteers Office Closures. September 6th, 21, October 29th, 21, November 11th, 21, December 24th, 21, December 31st, 21, January 17th, 22, February 21st, 22, May 30th, 22, July 4th, 22 Nevada Volunteers Contact Person. All programs should direct programmatic and fiscal questions and compliance concerns to their assigned Nevada Volunteer staff person. Alicia Blood, Director of AmeriCorps, Alicia at nevadavolunteers.org, 775-825-1900. Charlie Bruce, AmeriCorps Program Officer, C. Harley at nevadavolunteers.org, 775-224-9141. Requirements for financial and programmatic reporting. Financial reporting cost reimbursement grant financial reporting requirements. 1. Periodic expense report, PER. This form must be submitted monthly unless permission is granted from Nevada Volunteers for quarterly submission showing expenses to date. This form is completed in Encore and will be used as a request for reimbursement. 2. Upload/download files. In addition to the PER, for us to process a request for reimbursement, general ledger showing expenses, including match, must be uploaded into Encore using the Upload/Download Files option within the Financials menu. High-risk or new grantees may be required to submit additional information. Fixed-price grant financial reporting requirements. 1. Fixed amount grant invoice. This feature will be used to request reimbursement for fixed amount grants and is based on the approved member hours in Encore. In addition, fixed-price grantees must upload the fixed-price grant reimbursement request certification and journal showing payroll and health insurance payments for members using the Upload/Download feature. Additional financial reporting, all programs. 1. Aggregate Financial Report, AFR. This form must be submitted twice a year with the mid-year and final GPR. This form is submitted through the Financial Reporting section of the Encore system. A tutorial on how to submit AFRs can be found in Encore under the Help menu. 2. Program Income Report. In addition to the AFR, all programs must submit a Program Income Report in Encore. Please add all sources of income used as match for the reporting period. In the comments section, note the CFDA numbers for all federal funding sources, as well as the amount of any unspent program income generated as a result of the grant. Programmatic Reporting 2021-2022 Grant Progress Report Instructions. The following items must be completed in Encore as part of the Grant Progress Report, GPR. These items have not been finalized by AmeriCorps, and changes to requirements may occur prior to your initial reporting deadline. Tab 1 General Information. Enter AmeriCorps program name, grant number, program year 2021, and reporting period dates. If you have a grant amendment, also include this information. Tab 2 Demographics. The following demographics fields are required: number of individuals who applied to be AmeriCorps members, number of volunteers recruited or managed, number of volunteers recruited, trained, managed, or coordinated by your AmeriCorps program during the grant period. Each individual volunteer should be counted only once, even if they participated in more than one volunteer opportunity. Dollar amount of resources leveraged by the program. Dollar amount of cash and in-kind resources leveraged by your program to support activities under this specific program during the reporting period. The reported value should not include resources reported as formal match or cost share, if applicable, and should also not include resources provided by AmeriCorps as federal grant share or member benefits. Rather, the reported value should reflect any actual expenditures beyond the formal budget, similar to the other revenue funds projected in the AmeriCorps state and national grant application. The reported amount should be backed up by your own accounting records, but does not need to follow the documentation requirements for formal match or cost share. Resources raised by the national service participant, if applicable, should not be included in the reported value. This value should be reported in a separate performance data element. The remaining demographics fields are required for all grantees for whom the indicator is relevant to their program model. Relevant refers to something that is a significant part of a grantee's program design and theory of change. Tab 3, MSY. This tab is not required. Please check the "I have no MSY data to report this period" box at the top. Tab 4, Performance Indicators. On this tab in the top box, explain any instances where your program is not fully enrolled or if your retention rate is under 85%. In the bottom box, explain if exits were not completed within 30 days. Explanations should include the following: while your numbers are below the targets, 100% enrollment, 85% retention, 30-day exit, what corrective actions are being planned to improve enrollment and/or retention rates, including any adjustments to your recruitment and/or retention practices? Tab 5, Performance Measures. This feature is used to report on your progress towards meeting the approved performance measures. Responses should include any performance measure data pertaining to the reporting period. An explanation is required for any output or outcome measure for which one or more of the following is true. Situation required explanation: actual is lower than the target value. Reason: S, why the target was not met. Actual greatly exceeds the target value by 400% or more. Reason: S, why the value is significantly higher than originally projected. Clarify that no data was double counted, and all data are directly attributable to the program activities. Program activities and/or data collection are still ongoing, even if targets have already been met. State that activities are still ongoing and explain when program activities will be completed, and a full set of data will be available. Tab 6, Narratives. Answer these questions based on the guidance given by AmeriCorps, linked at top of form in Encore. This is the final tab in the Encore GPR report. Proof of data quality. This portion of the reporting should be submitted by email to your program contact as part of your GPR. Please submit backup documents of aggregate data used for your performance measure reporting. This does not mean every piece of data used but rather a document, Excel, Word, etc., where your data was compiled to report. If you have questions about this process, please reach out to Holly to determine what documents will fulfill this requirement. When to contact Nevada Volunteer Situation Appeal, funding decisions, budget changes greater than 10%, changes in key grant staff, changes to program scope, contract amendment, e-grants problem, application submission, e-grants problems, general equipment purchase, over $5,000, unbudgeted grant closeout, no cost grant extension request, grant funds will be unused, grievance filing, host site staff, grievance filing, member, host site partnership changes, late reporting, progress report, late reporting PERS, AFR major audit findings, member arrest, member placed outside of Nevada, member suspension, member transfer, in member transfer, out member serious injury, hospitalization or death, national service day, event pre-award grant spending, press media events, press release, news coverage program, change that will significantly impact a performance measure, reasonable accommodation, appeal, member release, compelling personal circumstance, member release, for cause reporting, submission deadlines, service events, slot conversion, slots left unfilled, slot refill, contact requirement, required pre-approval, required pre-approval, required documentation, contact e-grants national helpline first, required contact ASAP, recommended, required extension request, required optional, required needs written approval, required recommended, required optional, required within 5 days of formal notice, required consult sub-grant agreement or program director handbook, recommended, required needs approval, contact ASAP, required needs approval.
When you stop working for them, you can work for yourself. I said, when you stop working for them, you can work for yourself. Hold on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
2020. 6. Strengthen and grow AmeriCorps Nevada grant making. 7. Strengthen and grow the service and volunteer infrastructure. 7. Strengthen and grow the service and volunteer recognition. 7. Strengthen and grow the organizational capacity. 7. Supplemental state service plan for Nevadans age 55 and older. 8 methods. 8 key findings. 8 benefits. 8 people. 8 positive influence. 8 plentiful opportunities. 9 challenges. 9 access to technology issues. 9 communication barriers. 9 organizational capacity issues. 9 recommendations. 10 access to services. 10 communication. 10 outreach. 10 technology. 10 signatory page. 11. Acknowledgements. Nevada volunteers would like to thank the graduate students from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, Robin Mendoza, Michelle Brown, Raquel Juarez Cruz, James Fitch, Justin Perry for their work on these projects. Special thanks to Dr. Jessica Word, who oversaw these projects and provided valuable guidance. We deeply appreciate everyone who participated in the state service plan process. Hundreds of nonprofit leaders took time to respond to a survey and/or participate in interviews. Their voice and feedback essential is to our work. Thank you for partnering with us to help better serve the state. Thank you to our commissioners who volunteer their time to ensure that Nevada Volunteers is fulfilling the work needed across the state. Thank you to Governor Sisolak and his team for their support of national service and volunteerism in Nevada. Nevada Volunteers State Service Plan 2020-2023-2. Executive Summary. In accordance with Federal Regulation 45 CFR 2550.80, Nevada Volunteers develops a comprehensive service and volunteer plan to establish organization priorities, This is done every 3 years and is developed through an open and public process and captures data from a diverse cross-section of community organizations in the state. The 2020-2023 State Service Plan and Supplemental State Service Plan for Nevadans aged 55 and up were created in collaboration with graduate students and faculty from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, UNLV School of Public Policy and Leadership. The studies utilized a mixed methods approach and captured feedback from a broad and diverse cross-section of Nevada. The survey and interview protocol used were developed, administered, and analyzed to better understand the needs and assets of the service and volunteer landscape in Nevada. Findings from the study point towards continued leadership in the grant making for AmeriCorps Nevada. A need for improved understanding of the state's volunteer infrastructure in order for the organization to better serve its growth, and opportunities for growth in service and volunteer recognition. Using the survey data, Nevada volunteers determined how limited federal and state resources could best be used to support needed program priorities. The result was key objectives that landed in 4 categories of strengthening and growing: 1. AmeriCorps Nevada grant making, 2. Service and volunteer infrastructure, 3. Service and volunteer recognition, and 4. Organizational capacity. The key objectives, activities, and outcomes identified will help Nevada volunteers better serve the state over the next 3-year period. Nevada Volunteers State Service Plan 2020-2023-3. Methodology to better understand the service and volunteer landscape in Nevada. Nevada volunteers partnered with the UNLV School of Public Policy and Leadership to develop and conduct 2 studies towards the fulfillment of the state service plan. The first study was a survey of nonprofit organizations designed to understand the barriers, opportunities, and community needs with regards to service and volunteerism. The second study was to understand the unique benefits and challenges in service and volunteering for adults age 55 and older. Complete information regarding the methods and findings of the Supplemental State Service Plan can be found on page 10. The nonprofit organization survey was developed in partnership with UNLV graduate students and Nevada volunteers staff. The survey consisted of 42 questions, with several being open-ended for respondent narratives. The survey was emailed to Nevada organizations registered as a 501c3, with an operating budget of $59,999 or more. After accounting for duplicates and returned or failed emails, the total number of recipients was 583. The survey was open for approximately 1 month and recipients received weekly reminders. A total of 192 responses were collected, 33% response rate, and analyzed by the UNLV graduate students and their professor. A summary of findings along with the dataset were sent to Nevada volunteers for review. From there, the Nevada Volunteers team analyzed the data and determined key objectives to prioritize over the next 3 years. These key objectives fell into 4 main categories of work in strengthening and growing: 1. AmeriCorps Nevada grant making, 2. Service and volunteer infrastructure, 3. Service and volunteer recognition, and 4. Organizational capacity. Using this plan as a guide, Nevada volunteers will be able to better serve the state in the coming years. Nevada Volunteers State Service Plan 2020-2023-4. Key findings: organization profile respondents were representative of the state, with 80% identifying as urban serving and 29% rural serving. Most respondents reported having a systematic approach to managing volunteers, 71%, and 70-plus volunteers, 41%. While 65% reported having a dedicated staff member to manage volunteers. Very few had a full-time person in this role. See Table 1.1. The majority of respondents reported that their organization does not receive federal funding, 69%, with several noting barriers due to red tape and restrictions and capacity of the organization. Table 1.1 percentage of time managing volunteers. If yes, what percentage of their time is spent managing volunteers? Number percent less than 24%, 34, 25%, 25%, 49%, 26, 19%, 50%, 74%, 16, 12%, 75%, 99%, 25, 19%, 100%, 13, 10%, I don't know, 20, 15%, grand total 134, 100% volunteer engagement infrastructure. Several questions were asked to assess the barriers and opportunities for volunteer engagement in the state. Most respondents saw volunteerism as an extremely effective strategy to address community needs, 52%. Barriers to utilizing volunteers included finding volunteers with the needed skill set, 45%, not enough time to recruit volunteers, 40%, not having enough time to manage volunteers, 35%, and not enough time to train volunteers, 34%. When asked if their organization needs training on volunteer recruitment and/or volunteer management, the responses were mixed, with the majority selecting somewhat agree or neither agree or disagree for both. Table 1.2. Table 1.2 Volunteer engagement training needs. Our organization needs training on volunteer recruitment, volunteer management. Strongly agree 26, 16%, 29, 18%, somewhat agree, somewhat disagree. Grand total 48, 29%, 25, 15%, 165, 100%, 49, 30%, 19, 12%, 165, 100%, neither agree or disagree 49, 30%, 50, 30%, strongly disagree 17, 10%, 18, 11%. With regards to volunteer recognition, the majority of respondents reported not having a formal recognition program in place, 55%. Organizations recognize their volunteers predominantly through their internal newsletter or website, 59%, and social media and/or news outlets, 54%. The top challenges of running a volunteer program were identified as volunteers looking for one-time projects when the organization has a need for ongoing volunteers, 48%, and volunteer retention, 45%. From these findings, it is clear the volunteer infrastructure in Nevada needs continued support. Though organizations surveyed said they had a formal volunteer program, they reported challenges around recruitment, retention, and recognition. These challenges are not surprising when considering that very few organizations have a full-time person overseeing their volunteer programs, and formalized recognition programs are scarce. The response on organizational training needs was lukewarm, which needs to be explored further to better understand the mixed results. Nevada Volunteer State Service Plan 2020-2023-5. There are clear opportunities for Nevada volunteers to support organizations in their volunteer recognition efforts and better understand how to support and strengthen the volunteer infrastructure in the state. During the next 3 years, Nevada volunteers will put resources into better understanding the landscape and needs of the volunteer infrastructure to be more responsive in its programming. AmeriCorps feedback on the visibility, need, and interest in AmeriCorps in the state was very positive. The majority of respondents have heard of AmeriCorps, 86%, and noted that capacity building and direct service would be most beneficial for their organizations, 37% for each. While a majority were interested in AmeriCorps state funds, 62%, most could only use 1-3 members engaging in direct service, 65%. AmeriCorps is becoming more recognizable in Nevada. However, it is unclear if organization leaders differentiate between the different streams of national service. There is an opportunity for continued education, outreach, and cross-stream collaboration to help Nevadans understand the scope of national service. Though organizations are interested in direct service, AmeriCorps Nevada, they need less than the minimum amount required for an AmeriCorps Nevada grant. These findings echo what Nevada Volunteers has known anecdotally for years. The capacity of organizations is a barrier to accessing AmeriCorps Nevada grants. Thus, working with larger organizations to utilize an intermediary model is a workable solution. Additionally, if Nevada Volunteers had program authority 1 for AmeriCorps Nevada, we would be able to better meet the needs of Nevada organizations, as this would allow us to place 1 to 3 members at small organizations and manage the program administration from the Commission office. Community needs respondents were asked to rank the 5 most critical unmet needs in their communities. Responses fluctuated slightly across regions, but the aggregated responses were ranked as follows: mental health, 58%, homelessness, 54%, healthcare, access to or lack of, 39%, educational outcomes for students K-12, 39%, and substance abuse, 34%. Understanding the unmet community needs across the state helps guide the targeted outreach of Nevada volunteers. With this information, we are better able to educate organizations working in these areas on national service and volunteerism as solutions. As Nevada Volunteers continues to build its organizational capacity, there might be additional ways we can support organizations working on these community needs in the future. Summary: these findings highlight areas of focus for Nevada Volunteers' strategic directions moving forward. More exploratory work needs to be done in understanding the state's volunteer infrastructure in order to better support its growth. There is an opportunity for Nevada Volunteers to take on a stronger role in recognizing service and volunteerism in the state. Based on these findings, Nevada Volunteers should continue efforts in education and outreach regarding AmeriCorps Nevada and national service. Additionally, there is an opportunity for Nevada Volunteers to build its organizational capacity in order to better serve the state. Strategic goals for 2020-2023. After analyzing the data collected, the Nevada Volunteers team identified strategies to address the findings of this survey. These strategies fall into 4 categories of strengthening and growing: 1. AmeriCorps Nevada grant making, 2. Service and volunteer infrastructure, 3. Recognition of service and volunteerism, and 4. Organizational capacity. The key objectives for each category are described in the section below. 1. Per the National and Community Service Trust Act of 1990, Section 119, commissioned are listed as eligible entities to apply for funds to run an AmeriCorps program. Nevada Volunteer State Service Plan 2020-2023-6. Strengthen and grow AmeriCorps Nevada grant-making. Nevada Volunteers will continue to administer and manage AmeriCorps Nevada funds in order to meet community-identified needs throughout the state. To this end, Nevada Volunteers will focus on the following key objectives. 1. Reduce risk of the portfolio through activities such as compliance monitoring, guidance, and training. 2. Increase the number of AmeriCorps Nevada programs through program development, outreach, and education. 3. Maintain responsive and inclusive grant-making through targeted outreach and support. Strengthen and grow the service and volunteer infrastructure as demonstrated by the data collected. Volunteerism and national service are effective strategies to meeting community-identified needs. However, data points to a lack of infrastructure for these strategies. To strengthen and grow the service and volunteer infrastructure, Nevada Volunteers will focus on the following key objectives. 1. Expand nvvolunteerconnect.org through increased and targeted marketing and outreach, conducting market research to better understand organization needs, and establish baselines to help determine future growth. 2. Establish LeaderCorps through professional development opportunities for members, exploring alumni opportunities, and collaboratively determining activities and outcomes with LeaderCorps members to ensure that we are responsive to state needs. 3. Support national service in Nevada by strengthening partnerships with other streams of service and increasing cross-stream collaboration. 4. Increase awareness of Nevada Volunteers and local AmeriCorps opportunities through targeted marketing and outreach, strategic partnerships, and education on services. 5. Support volunteer engagement leaders through convening and supporting related professional associations and/or communities of practice, i.e., do via VOAD, and collaboratively determining additional activities and outcomes. 6. responsive and inclusive program development through targeted outreach and support of the sector. Strengthen and grow the service and volunteer recognition. Recognition of service and volunteerism in Nevada is lacking. Thus, Nevada volunteers will continue to provide leadership to strengthen and grow recognition of service and volunteerism in the state in the following ways. 1. Grow the Governor's Points of Light Awards by determining barriers for participation, creating targeted marketing and outreach plans, and implementing continual evaluation of the program to ensure we are meeting the needs of the state. 2. Responsive service and volunteer recognition through determining nonprofit recognition needs and boosting the Governor's Certificate Program. 3. Inclusive service and volunteer recognition through targeted outreach and support to underrepresented areas. Strengthen and grow the organizational capacity to better serve the state. Nevada volunteers will focus on strengthening and growing its organizational capacity. To this end, Nevada volunteers will 1. Maintain and grow expertise through staff participation in professional development opportunities, conferences, training, etc., and prioritizing sessions focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. 2. Improve the organization's capacity to support and reflect Nevada in service and volunteerism through creating a cohesive strategy for the next state service plan process and engaging in an iterative review process twice a year. 3. Strengthen volunteer engagement within the organization through targeted commissioner recruitment and continuing to apply service enterprise best practices. 4. Refine the organizational identity through determining our brand identity and strategy. 5. Increase the organization's financial stability through strengthening our relationship with the governor's office and identifying other funding sources. Nevada Volunteer State Service Plan 2020-2023-7. Supplemental State Service Plan for Nevadans age 55 and older. The idea of volunteerism can mean different things to different people within our communities. According to Nevada RSVP, 4,475 adults age 55 and contributed to volunteer efforts sponsored by the organization, totaling 35,957 volunteer hours. As part of Nevada's State Service Plan, Nevada Volunteers has created a targeted plan to include the state's commitment to include Nevadans age 55 and over in service and volunteerism. A needs assessment of various organizations and stakeholders that provide volunteer opportunities for adults age 55 and older was conducted in order to provide meaningful information about the benefits and challenges of volunteerism of this population. Methods 15 qualitative interviews were conducted from key informant stakeholders in Nevada based on their needs and resources to implement adequate volunteer and service opportunities for adults age 55 and over. The interviews consisted of questions about their thoughts of needs in the community and the types and levels of services to address those needs. The target interviewees were those in supervisory or managerial roles. Through interviewing individuals at this level, more in-depth responses could be recorded. The interviewees were chosen based on jurisdiction so that all varieties of agencies and programs were encompassed. Key findings: a majority of the agencies and programs chosen were senior centers, followed by service programs, such as those that act as an information center for certain populations. The mission and values of these agencies and programs mainly focused on health and wellness, i.e., providing free meals and active lifestyle classes, followed by focusing on advocacy and assistance, social change services, or being a part of a parks and recreation center. A majority of the individuals interviewed for this assessment have been working for their organization program for more than 10 years. Only 33% of the interviewees have been in their position for less than 5 years. Based on these interviews, the following benefits and challenges have been recorded in order to understand and address the issues affecting volunteerism affecting the 55 and older population. Benefits: people. A majority of the agencies and programs interviewed stated that their older volunteers are genuinely interested in volunteering and have positive responses to their experience. Many organizations have used the following adjectives to describe their 55 and over volunteers: helpful, kind, loyal, patient, and willing. The pros are that seniors who usually volunteer with us have been around for a long time. They are patient, kind, and want to know and serve the community. They are an asset that be helpful. They want to feel like they are a part of something. Positive influence. Volunteer opportunities that are provided have given adults age 55 and over a sense of purpose and ownership, while also providing socialization so that they do not feel alone. Many reported that their volunteers felt like they are a part of something, which gives the organization a sense of purpose in helping this population. A lot of our seniors come here alone, so they can come here and make conversations with new people while also enjoying the recreational activities we have to offer. I actually know that one of our seniors actually reunited with one of his old high school friends here, so that's great to renew that relationship they once had at our center. Nevada Volunteer State Service Plan 2020-2023 Plentiful opportunities. Organizations described the volunteer activities and events that they host are diverse and different. They tend towards this population's interests, are flexible to their needs, and thought that they engage their volunteers well. The benefits are definitely the community and the people. If it weren't for the people, we wouldn't have these opportunities. Many nonprofit organizations are willing to work with us and provide our 50-plus population plentiful opportunities. Challenges access to technology issues. A majority of programs and organizations saw that a lack or need of using technology to support their volunteer programs is needed. Many saw that they did not have the funding or knowledge to enact technological change themselves, and that adults aged 55 and over would like more educational offerings so that they can better learn to access technology. Many also stated that technology can help their organization become more transparent in outreach initiatives online. Technology is becoming an important tool for our members to become aware of and taught how to use. It's everywhere and there's no escaping it. I'm always an advocate for more classes to teach seniors how to access technology, whether it be at a local rec or senior center. Because then, once people know how to use this, they can be able to access volunteer resources found online even better. Communication barriers. A main theme seen was that adults aged 55 and over wanted to voice their opinion and make decisions about what they wanted out of the program or center they were attending. Clear communication amongst individuals and staff was a need to better the personal and outreach aspect of services and engagement. Two things: fun and communication. Volunteering has to be fun and worth it. Communication, because our seniors won't know what's fun until they know when and where to participate. This keeps them wanting to volunteer and come back to our center. The more opportunities, the better the outcome of volunteer engagement. Organizational capacity issues. Through improving the following key areas, this can be beneficial for future success of these programs and organizations. Location of the center. Many rural organizations saw that they struggled with volunteer retention rates due to where they were located versus more heavily populated organizations' programs. The only challenge I have is that we may be inaccessible to some parts of our community, but I hope that our transportation system can help with this. Limited staff. Small staff sizes or the need to recruit more staff members to coordinate volunteer efforts were reported as crucial to address for organizational success. Some of the challenges for our center is that we have a very small staff. It's usually just me and 4 other part-time employees tending to our seniors. We depend on volunteers in our community to help us provide these services. Limited hours. A majority of the agencies interviewed stated that they would like to extend their normal business hours to evening or weekends. Doing so would provide more volunteer opportunities and provide a more flexible schedule for seniors who are only available at these times. Extended hours for our center could help benefit those that are working that part-time job and can only come in the evening to volunteer, so being open on evening and weekends would be beneficial to our center. Nevada Volunteer State Service Plan 2020-2023-9. Transportation. Limited access to transportation was seen as a barrier that some organizations were still trying to figure out. Lack of funding for vans and drivers, as well as the physical location of their organization, were also correlated to this issue. In rural Nevada, we are spread out from everyone else. We are kind of isolated versus urban Nevada. So if volunteers want to travel to us, it could take up a 2-hour drive just to come to the center. Funding opportunities. More funding for volunteer programs and training for staff members were seen as emerging and upcoming needs for programs and organizations. We would always love more funding for our current activities and programs. That's the strongest resource that is needed on our list to get resources we need, such as more computers, a renovated kitchen, repairs for our vans, and more activities for our seniors, such as workout gear and machines. Recommendations through this needs assessment. The following recommendations have been developed for creating more volunteerism and service opportunities for adults age 55 and over. These recommendations are below. Access to services. Resources need to be available in order for adults age 55 and over to be active volunteers. Existing and emerging needs such as extended hours, incentives, and transportation can assist this population to be more willing to volunteer and provide service. Communication. Agencies and stakeholders that serve the 55 and older population need to come together to collaborate on engagement and community connections for all and any resources available for this population. Outreach. An increase of outreach and awareness is needed for agencies and stakeholders to better expand their transparency and opportunities for the 55 and older population. Technology. Providing agencies and stakeholders access and knowledge about technological advances can be helpful in structuring and accessing opportunities for these programs and organizations. With the guidance of this plan, we hope to better engage the talents and knowledge of Nevada's adults age 55 and over, as well as external community members, in making a lasting impact throughout the state. Nevada Volunteers State Service Plan 2020-2023-10. Signatory Page Scott Emerson, Chair, Nevada Volunteers Commission Stacy Muse, Executive Director, Nevada Volunteers Matt Johnson, Director, Corporation National and Community Service State Office, the Honorable Steve Sisolak, Governor, State of Nevada. Nevada Volunteers State Service Plan 2020-2023-11.
$2,500. Up with 500 applications.
That's a great question, Tyler Klimas, for the record. And it's so I'll give you our methodology behind that. And we really took a close look at this. We take you back to 2014, the first licensing round for medical marijuana licenses. DPBH received 520 applications in that round. Now that was for all establishment types: cultivation, production, dispensary, and labs. Fast forward to 2018 for that retail licensing round, the most recent one, DOT, the Department of Taxation, received 462 applications. Both of those licensing rounds were severely underestimated as far as how many licenses they would receive. And so we feel like we're very much in a similar spot here, but I'll take you even down further. So what we looked at is there's approximately 160 current licensees that have either a cultivation facility or production facility, but don't have a retail store. We would expect that the majority, if not all of these, will apply for an independent lounge. There's businesses that do business in other states, not Nevada. There's no residency requirement for these independent licenses. So we'd expect maybe 100 of those to apply as well. There's also another group of these specialized entrepreneurs, right? We talk about restaurants, comedy clubs, nightclubs, yoga studios as part of this consumption lounge process. And so we think at least 200 of those, and again, that's in state and outside of state, would apply. And then obviously there's a small group of people out there that don't have any cannabis experience, but want to take a shot and get into this industry. We projected approximately 40 of those. And so just using kind of the historical licensing rounds as context, and then going through and 500 is a number we feel very comfortable with. It may be low. This is a first in the nation type of license for the independent side. It's really, as long as you're compliant, you fit within the regulations. It's really kind of up to you. There's not a lot of restrictions on what kind of business model and experience you need to have. And so, Vice Chair, I hope that answered your question about how we got to that number of 500.
Thank you very much. Very impressive. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other questions for Ms. Klimas? I see none. So I will now go to Superintendent Ebert on agenda or on F22 that we're taking together with this about the transfer of funds. And Superintendent Ebert, if you want to just walk us through that really quick.
Thank you, Chair Brooks.
Go ahead, Heidi.
For the record, I serve as the Deputy Superintendent for the Student Investment Division here at the Department of Education. Our work program is a companion work program to the agenda item you just discussed, and it aligns the revenue that is expected to be transferred into the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan account with the revenue projections that have been updated by the Cannabis Compliance Board.
Thank you. And if you could clarify what that amount is.
The work program would increase the revenue and expenditure authority by approximately $9.2 million in fiscal year 2022.
Thank you. Do any of the members have any questions for Ms. Hartz or Superintendent Ebert? Senator Keycaffer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So do we have an estimate as to what that number might be for 23, since a lot of this revenue is tied to application fees? I assume those are going to be one time. So this isn't going to be an ongoing revenue stream at the same level, or would we expect that?
Heidi Hartz, for the record, we would defer that question to the Cannabis Compliance Board.
Sure, thank you. Tyler Klimas for the record. And so, yeah, those one-time application fees is something we'll realize in year one and likely not at least that large in year two. However, know that consumption lounge licenses are not capped. So this isn't the one lounge or the one licensing round and that's it. So there will be another licensing round, I mean, likely the next year, obviously gauging the popularity of the program. But yes, it will be, we will realize that large of an influx of revenue going forward after this initial licensing fee or licensing round, excuse me.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Klimas. Any other questions from the committee of Superintendent Ebert, Ms. Hartz, or Mr. Klimas? All right, I see none. And before I request a motion, I just want to remind all of our members, if since we're doing this on Zoom, if I can't see you, I don't know what your vote is, and I will assume that you had to step away or are absent for the vote. So now that I've made that request, I would entertain a motion to approve items 7, 21, and 22 together.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton. I believe I heard a second from Senator Dennis.
Comment, Mr. Chair.
Oh, Assemblywoman Titus.
Thank you. With the motion and the second, I just want to make a comment before the vote. Although I did vote against the consumption lounge during session, I do feel that they need regulation. I certainly am a little concerned about the amount of cost it is to regulate this industry versus the amount that is truly going to education. But I appreciate Assemblyman Yeager's questions regarding that, about how much we spend to regulate this industry, but I will be supporting this motion. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Assemblywoman Titus. Any other comments on the motion? I see none. So all in favor of the motion, aye, and raise your hand. And opposed, nay. Raise your hand. So I have, the motion passes unanimously with the members present. Assemblywoman Howdigy, I did not see you, so we'll, oh, she's a aye.
I just
Thank
like
you.
that.
Appreciate it, thank you. So it passes unanimously, and we can move on to our next items under item F. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Adair, Mr. Klimas, Superintendent Ebert, and Ms. Hartz for helping us out this morning. That brings us to our next items, 23, 24, 25, 26, and 28. And we will be taking all of those together. They're all from the Department of Education. And we have with us Superintendent Ebert and Ms. Hartz, as well as, I believe, Mr. Moore and Ms. Gonzalez as well this morning, and to walk through those items. And so if you would like, Superintendent Ebert, you can kick it off and then hand it off to members of your team as appropriate.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. Heidi Hartz for the record. I'm going to go ahead and do the overview for each of these work programs, and then allow the other deputies and the superintendent to answer more specific programmatic questions. So agenda item number 23 requests authority to receive and expend approximately $18.6 million in additional ARP funding. The American Rescue Plan includes supplemental funding for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. These funds are intended to support early intervention and special education services for infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities and their families. Agenda item 24 seeks authority to transfer funds out of the reserve category for the ARP ESSER funding and move it into the expense category so that we can move forward with two projects that have been identified as reasonable and appropriate for the use of these funds. And those would include projects that would allow us to address closing the opportunity gaps for certain students who have traditionally been underserved, and to provide access to adult education and work development opportunities for eligible learners. Agenda item 26 also seeks to transfer ARP ESSER funding out of the reserve category and into an expenditure category. This would allow us to fulfill a contractual agreement that we have with one of our vendors to continue assessments of our students. This contract was negotiated during the legislative session, and during the negotiations, it was determined that there were some increases in the costs for these services that we were unable to address during the legislative session. So we're looking to backfill that contract for this biennium using these emergency relief funds. And agenda item 28 is a corresponding or companion work program to that, that would again allow us to fulfill our contractual obligation. And then I believe I skipped one other work program, and I apologize for that. That is the work program that seeks to transfer funding out of reserves and into an expense category so that the Department of Education can enter into an agreement with Donors Choose. During the legislative session, the department put forward that request as part of a budget amendment, and the members of the money committees asked the Department of Education continue to work with Donors Choose to determine if there are ways to reduce their project management costs. The department has been successful in those negotiations, and we appreciate the generosity and the collaborative nature of Donors Choose. And we hope that we can again present this work program for your consideration today. With that, we'd be happy to answer specific questions for any of those work programs.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hartz. I know Assemblyman Gorlow has a question to start off with, and then I have a few as well.
Chair Brooks, I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more about the projects and how they're going to assist the school district and the charter schools as they recover from the pandemic. And then I have one more quick question after that as well. Thanks.
So for the record, this is Superintendent Joan Ebert. Thank you for having us here this morning. All of these projects are in alignment with how the funds are allowed to be used during COVID, but more importantly, not only the federal guidance, but also the state guidance. So our own State Board of Education came up with 8 parameters for the expenditures of these funds: social emotional support, ensuring acceleration of learning, supports for our educators as, excuse me, as part of this work. And so all of these work programs do align with those guidelines.
Thank you. And when you were talking about item F23, early intervention was mentioned. Could you talk a little bit about what that encompasses?
This is Jonathan Moore for the record. My apologies, my video does not seem to be working. But regarding the funds for special education, so early intervention includes ensuring that when students are in the initial phases of diagnosis or even prior to diagnosis, that they're able to receive supports that are needed in order to potentially correct challenges that they may be encountering.
Okay, so would that be the children of birth to 3, that portion of early intervention, or as they transition from the birth to 3 to the school system? Are we talking about that instead? And I apologize, my bird's having a fit.
No problem. This is Jonathan Moore for the record. So there are 2 funding streams under this particular award. There's the IDA Part B, which covers our students in K-12, and then there's Part C, which covers our students in early childhood. And so both of those funds combined make up this award to school districts to support early interventions as well as other services.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Chair Brooks.
Thank you. Before, I wanted to kick off some questions on item 25. But before we go to that, do we have any other questions from members? I see that Vice Chair Carlston has a question.
And it is on item 25 also, Mr. Chairman, so if you don't.
Okay, yeah, if we could just take those together, because I wanted to talk about those too. Senator
I'll
Buck.
be the cleanup better, thank you.
Yeah, Senator Buck.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. I just have a quick question for Superintendent Ebert. You know, I love Donors Choose because it really engages the outside communities and business and industry by having teachers write these simple grants for what they need in their schools for their kids, and have raised, you know, over $500,000 from outside agencies. So I just wondered if there was something in play to get private industry and business involved also to help support, so we can maybe double our dollars.
They're not going to change their behavior.
Thank you, Senator Bach, for the question. We're really excited about the work, and I actually need to step back and thank the whole IFC for allowing us time to go back and work with Donors Choose. So this not only with the investment directly into our classrooms for our teachers and our children, also amplifying the opportunity for the project's private sector to support our communities. And over the years, we actually received a recent report from Donors Choose. Nevada educators have received over $10 million from not only the private sector within our state, but also around the United States. Folks want to support educators. They see the projects, they see them as innovation, and so they have been providing those funds. So we see this as not only these funds being made available at the state level, but to your point, to be made available for the private sector to also invest directly into our classrooms.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chair Brooks. Thank you, Superintendent Ebert. It definitely is great when there's match funding from outside agencies. It really does help. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Buck. Thank you, Superintendent. Before we dig deeper on 25, I think that Senator Keykeper had a question on item 23, and then I believe Assemblywoman Miller had an question on item 28. Senator Keykeper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I was trying to figure out the sort of the distribution formula that you're using for the IDEA funds. The chart that's in our backup has sort of an initial calculation based on total student population, but then an overlay based on poverty. And I don't remember us ever using poverty as a distribution piece for special ed funds in the past.
Yeah, that's
and maybe there's something specific in this grant, or maybe I just don't fully understand how we distribute them currently, but it's a new component of IDEA funds for me since neither of those programs are needs tested. So if you could explain that, I would appreciate it.
This is Jonathan Moore for the record. So the distribution of funds uses the same formula as IDEA Part B and Part C. It's important to note that these are supplemental funds that were allocated to the LEAs by formula. And so this was at the direction of the Office of Special Education Programs through the United States Department of Education. So all funds must be allocated to LEAs. Funds may not be used to increase set aside funding. And so part of that allocation methodology stated that 85% of the funds were allocated to each LEA's relative proportion of the total public and private school enrollment. And this is sometimes referred to as the population distribution. And then the remaining 15% of those funds were allocated by each LEA's relative proportion of total free and reduced lunch participants. And so you may notice the variation because these are supplemental funds in response to COVID. The United States Department of Education did add the additional component.
Exactly what I needed. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator. And Assemblywoman Miller.
Thank you, Chair. My question is in regards to F28, and it's about offering the test in the three languages. So I know in 2019, there was legislation passed that stated that we would offer the standardized test in all available languages that are available, for instance, through SBAC and such. And I believe SBAC now is up to offering 20 different core languages. And so I'm just wondering, why are we limited to, well, I have a two-part question. One, it says to translate various assessments. So is that including all of the different assessments, not just the SBAC? Would that include MAP and other iReady, whatever, other tests that the students are taking? And also, why is it limited to just Spanish, Chinese, and Tagalog? And are there plans to increase? Because we know that our students here in Nevada speak more than just those three main languages. Chair, is someone, or?
My apologies, my microphone. My apologies. Jonathan, for the record, thank you, Assemblywoman. So there are two considerations with regard to the translation. So in 2019, you're right, the legislation was passed. There was not an appropriation at that time, and so we're fortunate now to have the federal relief funds to be able to do that. This proposal is in regard to the assessments within the Nevada state assessment system. And so Smarter Balance currently does offer the assessment in multiple languages. Currently, we have prioritized, based on the funding part of the consideration, we've prioritized the top three. It's important to note that For many of those languages, it's not necessarily the assessment, but various components of the assessment, such as the glossary, such as access to various tools that are offered in those multiple languages to support students. So this request is seeking to implement those at this time based on the amount of funding we have available and based on what the vendor actually has available for our specific assessment.
Follow-up, Chair, just a brief follow-up.
Please.
So with that, Dr. Moore, once we provide this, will this be ongoing? Then this won't just be where the translations and support systems are just available for that school year in 2022. Will this be continued throughout in the future with the future leases with the vendors?
Jonathan Moore for the record. Thank you, Assemblywoman. So it is our hope that we will continue. So as we look to negotiate either or further extend or negotiate new contracts, this would be a service that we would include in those contract negotiations. They may require an additional appropriation depending on cost, but it is certainly our hope to continue to provide these supports to students moving forward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Thank you, Ms. Moore. And do we have any other questions on items 23, 24, 25, or 26 or 28? Because I think we have a couple questions on 25. All right, I don't see any. So I'm just gonna, first of all, we talked so much about this item last in session, and I really appreciate, this is the donors choose item 25. I really appreciate the NDE staff and team and leadership going back and addressing a lot of those issues that were brought up by the members, and then coming up with a creative solution to, I think, address some of those concerns, but yet still use this important tool to put money and resources in places where they can be used the most. Can you help me understand how you're promoting, how you plan to promote this to individual educators?
Thank you, Chair Brooks. So one of the methods that I used, actually, when I started this position, teachers did feel they did not have direct communication from the State Department of Education. And we actually have educators here with us today. As they know, I started communicating directly with them via email, opportunities from our office that are made available to educators. So there is going to be a direct link between myself and all of the licensed educators within our state. Layering that, 9 of our school districts do have a donors choose liaison that helps work with the educators as if they choose to take advantage, to develop their projects, make sure that they're aligned with our state standards,
So wonderful.
you know, that they're not missing maybe a component, to have a successful project launch within their classroom for their students. And then also too, donors choose themselves, as you've seen in the documentation that was provided, really has stepped up. They listened to the convening that was had. They watched it. They heard all of your questions. They actually are changing components of their website based on the conversation that was had between and amongst the members here. So it's a layered approach, starting directly with myself to the educators, districts supporting the teachers, and then also donors choose. And I hope all of you as well.
Thank you, Superintendent. And is there, first of all, if you could provide a quick and easy way that we can share that with educators and staff and parents and friends and everyone like that, that would be great. But also, when you do get a communication with an educator that wants a project, what guidelines are being used by Donors Choose when determining which projects will or will not receive funding?
So we went back to Donors Choose to look at all of the parameters, the standard components for projects within Donors Choose. Start with the educator writing an essay describing their project and the idea that they have for enhancing student learning. The teachers select specific resources needed to bring that project to life. And then the Donors Choose staff, gathers the materials, components to be able to mail directly to the teachers. That's the base and the standard work that Donors Choose has done. We, as a state, have asked them to customize additional components. We've asked them to create a help center that explains the steps for qualification within details. Teachers will ask whether they're requesting instructional materials, and if so, they must align the Nevada academic content standards to their project. Teachers were also asked that if they're requesting professional development support, enhancement, that they then align, if they're not directly aligned specifically to a standard, that they're aligned to Nevada's COVID-19 response and recovery. And that means that there are 4 categories in that area: ensuring safe and healthy in-person learning environments, conducive to social, emotional, academic development, access to distance education and technology capacity for educators, students, and families, social, emotional support of students in response to COVID-19, and support to parents, families, and communities. So those components are specific to the Nevada projects, based on our working with our team and Donors Choose.
Thank you, Superintendent. I have some further questions from Senator Dondero Luke, and then also Vice Chair Carlton. Senator Luke.
Thank you very much, Chair. Superintendent or whoever on your team wants to answer this. Is there on the Donors Choose site where if I'm a teacher and I don't really know that these funds, I don't know where I'm going to get funds from, but I want to get on Donors Choose and see if I can find curriculum materials. Is there a spot on there where I can see that Nevada has funding available?
So there will be a specific component, if this is approved, that Nevada educators will drop into. So specific to our educators. They actually, since the time we all met, they spun up Donors Choose spun up a specific site for Hawaii. Hawaii made a determination to support all of their educators as well. So we will have a similar location based just for us.
Yeah, Hawaii's probably doing other things.
Thank you very much for that information. And I agree with Chair Brooks, if we could have information, because periodically we get emails from teachers or we're contacted by people who want to know that information as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Superintendent. Vice Chair Carlton, if you still had a question, please go ahead.
Yes, I did. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Superintendent, for your patience in me having to schedule a meeting and cancel it and then making time for a phone call. I do appreciate that. I guess I want to go into the biggest concern that I heard in the committee when we had last time was the 15%, the confusion amongst all that. That was going to be about 1.2 million. That is no longer part of this discussion. Donors Choose has said that they will absorb that. I'm assuming that we're sending this $8 million out all in one tranche, and that they will probably put it into an account, and that's where they're probably going to make their money, is on the float on those dollars. If that is true, one of my other concerns might be is if we do send it all out in one and things don't go the way we want it to go, we don't really have a lot of options. So if you could address whether it's all going out at one time or whether it's going out proportionally. And also if you would make sure to mention, it was mentioned earlier about matching programs. This is not a matching program. There is no requirement for a match. This is an appropriation of $8 million to a private entity to support teachers. So I just want to make sure that we have a very clear record. If you could address those two items, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Carlton. So first, to your first question, we will be doing this on a reimbursement basis. And the projects, once they are let, they will be invoicing us. And so that will be the control there. The second question in regard to,
Fix your lips to say it, woman.
Apologies, it was more of a statement in regard to, yes, that this is not
Private.
a requirement for a match from private, that it is the $8 million that would be allocated from the state with no requirement.
No requirements, just free money.
And
On the
thank you
backs of
very
black
much, Mr.
people.
Chairman. I just want to make sure we're very clear that we're not requiring teachers to come up with a match. If it's over $800 and it's a $1,000 project, they can get folks to do it, but we're not making them come up with a match. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for clarifying that. And thank you, Superintendent Ebert, for clarifying that. I have another question from Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. I just wanted to follow back up on what some of my colleagues had asked in terms of the outreach and engagement strategy. And I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit further on, any plans that you have to identify and target specific schools. So I'm particularly familiar with this because I just went through and looked at all the schools that are in the district that I represent. For their projects coming back to school, and saw that some schools have many projects and many teachers are posting projects, and some schools have one teacher that is frequently posting projects, and some schools don't have any projects at all. So I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to any intent that you have to identify and target some of those areas where they're currently is kind of a lack of projects coming forward, and particularly if you're gonna layer kind of an analysis in to make sure that schools that are serving lower income student populations are being represented in this channel, because as we know, those are schools that particularly struggle to bring in some of these supplemental resources in various formats to support initiatives in their schools.
Thank you for great comments and questions in there as well. So as I noted, there are 9 school districts that already have staff identified within them that support Donors Choose and helping teachers put up projects. So looking across the entire state, which we do have those metrics that you're talking about, who currently posts and then who will post. You're absolutely right. And sometimes staff members are not aware of opportunities, and it is incumbent upon us to make sure that everyone is aware. So calling upon all of you, raising your hands, which I appreciate, amplifying that, but being strategic with the data of those that traditionally have not. I haven't had the opportunity specifically to reach out to principals directly, but all of 17 superintendents, as well as the State Public Charter School Authority, are well aware of this program. I met with a group last Saturday. We were talking about this project, and just touching base of the superintendents to make sure that this was a wise use of funds, getting these funds directly to classroom teachers who have endured so much with this shift, and they know what their students need. They're the ones that are closest to our students. And so those superintendents too will be amplifying. So a multi-layered approach, making sure that we're continuing the dashboard that they have shown us for tracking the projects and the educators is very robust. So we can sort by school, we can sort by grade level. We'll be able to sort by standards, all of those components. But but to your point, I think it's going to take, I know it's going to take all of us to reach our educators to make sure that they are aware of this opportunity. You also brought up the equity component of the project. This is a very large scale. It will be first in, first out.
That's all it
being
is.
targeted
First
up
in,
front.
first out.
We will reassess in December where we are with the expenditure of funds. As I mentioned earlier, Hawaii did
This is
a smaller
reimbursement,
project,
reimbursement.
but the funds and teachers applying went at a much faster rate than anyone predicted in Hawaii. So I
This is
hope that,
America.
I mean, that's good news, right? That the funding was taken advantage of in a quick time frame. But we are going to need to work together to make sure that everyone is aware of this opportunity.
Everyone.
Thank you, and I appreciate that response, and I also appreciate you kind of noting that you're gonna take some time to evaluate it and look forward to seeing some of the results of those evaluations that come out and looking at the breakdowns based on the available data of where the funds are flowing, so that we have the potential to try and modify our outreach and interventions to make sure that
Everyone knows
it gets where it needs to go. And
yeah, right. It's not getting
the other thing that I'll just note too is I've seen a lot of elementary participation and less middle school and even less high school. So those are just some of the things that I'm interested in seeing how we can look to support if this initiative moves forward. So thanks again for the response, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me the question.
Thank you, Assemblyman. And then I'm hoping it's our last comment, maybe ever, on this subject, but probably not, is from Assemblyman Roberts. And Assemblyman Roberts, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll be very brief. I just want to thank the Department of Education for going back and whittling that down, and basically a thanks to Donor Choose for picking up the tab for the overhead and making this a success. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Roberts. And so based on, I think, a lot of the interest that we've had, and then some of the questions that have come up both previously and then this morning, still morning, yeah. I would request that that you put together a quarterly report that you could present to IFC that just kind of shows a summary of the funding that's been awarded, and a listing of educator projects and that have been funded, not funded. Some of that information you were talking about that you're aggregating right now. If you could put that into a report kind of format and provide it to IFC on a quarterly basis, we'd appreciate that. And that way, I think a lot of our questions that we have will be answered. And then if we spent as much time talking about this subject, talking to educators and teachers in schools in our districts, I think we'd have spent all that money already. So if you can give us that information, it seems like there's quite a desire to share this with folks in our districts.
The transparency is critical, Mr. Chair has noted, and I'd be more than happy to provide those reports on a quarterly basis.
Nothing yet.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Any further comments or questions on not just this subject, but any of the other items that we just heard taken together with NDE? And apologies, I have to scan my both screens to see if I have anybody. It doesn't look as if we do, so thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Ms. Hartz. Thank you, Mr. Moore, and everyone else and Ms. Gonzalez for joining us this morning and helping us walk through these items. So if there's no further comments or questions on these items, I would entertain a motion to approve all 5 of them together. Yes, 5, that is correct. Item 23, F23, 24, 25, 26, and 28.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of all the items with the reporting requirement mentioned by you earlier.
Second. Thank you, Vice Chair, for adding that reporting requirement to the motion. And the second from Senator Dennis. Do I have any discussion on that motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, aye, and raise your hand, please. And we have everyone present. I'm sorry, I skipped a step there. Any nays, please raise your hand. All right, no opposition. And so we have, it passes unanimously with all the members present, and I see everyone but Senator Harris has voted. So motion carries, and we can move on to the next group of items or the next item, and that will be item 71 for the Department of Health and Human Services. Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Harris was having some technical difficulties. She is a yay and is voted affirmatively. I'm sorry about that, but just been notified by her. She's trying to work that out right now. So we will move on to item 71.
Mr. Chair.
Item 52, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Assemblywoman Titus asked that 52 could be pulled, and 53 was also identified for discussion afterward.
All right, I'm getting ahead of myself. Yes, so item 52, Department of Health and Human Services, Aging and Disability Services. And I believe we have Dina Schmidt here. And so if you want to go forward and walk us through item 52, I would appreciate that. And then I'm sure that Assemblywoman Titus might have some questions.
Absolutely. Good morning, Dina Schmidt for the record. I serve as the administrator for Aging and Disability Services Division. This work program adds $236,000 in federal grant funds to our home and community-based budget, with the goal of improving access to COVID-19 vaccinations for individuals age 60 and under, as well as caretakers. We are working closely with the United Nevada and the Public and Behavioral Health Division, as well as several of our community partners, to plan and coordinate outreach and assistance activities related to COVID vaccination, with a target on those people with disabilities and individuals under the age of 60, as well as their caretakers. Oftentimes, this is done through our Aging and Disability Resource Centers, which provide resources and service navigation to people in need of long-term support services throughout the state. And that's really the purpose and intent. We have already received previous funding for the 60 and older population. And so this is really just adding to those current activities that we're doing in the community, but for a different target population. And with that, I'm happy to answer the questions.
Thank you. And Chair Brooks, if I might ask a question or two.
Please do.
Thank you. So I appreciate all that you are doing to get folks vaccinated. I know, especially in Southern Nevada and absolutely throughout our state, we need to improve our vaccination rates. We know that the vaccine is successful in preventing the COVID. So again, thank you for all you have done. My question really revolves around any new or innovative ideas regarding reassurance to folks to get this vaccine. We know that the population, we've done very well with 65 and older, getting them vaccinated. And now we've extended it from 12 to 60 and reaching out to those communities. What are you going to do different? Because now they're suggesting that perhaps we even need a third booster that's come out in the last couple of days. So what are you doing different? Doing the same old and missing these groups? I just need to know some ideas.
So Dina Schmidt for the record. So I'm going to defer to Jeff Duncan down. He's our community, and he's been working closely. Him and his team have been working closely with United Nevada and community partners. And perhaps he is aware of some of the innovative ideas that have been discussed with those groups.
This is Jeff Dunn for the record. I'm actually going to turn it over to Cheyenne Pasquale, who will handle this one.
Thank you, Cheyenne Pasquale, for the record. So we have been in conversations with various community partners that serve these individuals. And we are really looking at targeting messaging in rural areas, but also targeting messaging that is appropriate for people with disabilities and caregivers. And kind of utilizing our existing network of resource centers who are trusted partners in the community, who work closely with these individuals to be able to answer questions, get them connected to appropriate resources to learn more about the vaccine. And really, I can say that today we are having those ongoing conversations, and this funding will be released as a competitive notice of funding opportunity to allow communities to identify innovative strategies that will help with this outreach and assistance effort.
Do you have a current vaccination percent of the group you are mentioning and a targeted vaccine rate that you're going for?
This is Cheyenne Pasquale for the record. We do not have that in our hands today, but we've been working closely with Immunize Nevada and Division of Public and Behavioral Health to look at that data and would include that in our notice of funding opportunity.
Thank you, because I think it's important that we can track whether these campaigns are successful or not. And we absolutely need to recognize where we are failing on these campaigns. Mm-hmm. And just a suggestion, I thought it was always that folks have to go to get vaccinated. And perhaps one thought might be that you take the vaccine to them, that you reach out more in communities instead of doing more studies on it, that you actually reach out to folks. So I'll be interested to see, and I would like that information. I'm sure other members would, on what the current rates are, what your targeted rates are. We need to have some hard data here and making sure we reach the folks that need to be vaccinated, that want to be vaccinated, and encourage trust in this vaccine. So I'll be looking forward to having that information. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for the questions.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Titus, and thank you, Ms. Schmidt. Any other questions on this item, on item 52? All right, I would take, seeing no other questions or comments, I would take a motion to approve item 52.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion from Assemblywoman Titus. I have a second from Senator Dennis. Do I have any discussion on that motion? I do not see any, so all in favor, aye. All right, I see one. And any opposed, nay? Motion passes unanimously, and thank you very much. And we can move on to item 53. And item 53 is also aging and disability services, home and community-based services. And we have Ms. Schmidt still with us to walk us through item 53, please.
Thank you, Dina Schmidt, for the record. This work program requests an addition of $11.5 million in federal American Rescue Plan funding under the Older Americans Act. This funding is used to ensure older adults and caregivers have access to essential services to help them maintain their independence and help during the COVID pandemic. This work program is creating 7 new positions that are needed to manage the fiscal, grant management, and reporting activities related to the additional funds we've received over the past 2 years. As you know, during the session, there was really not a lot of opportunity, and we discussed a lot during session the fact that our agency has grown. We received caseload and caseload growth, but we received no new support staff in our fiscal, IT, and HR units to support the ongoing activities related to the growth of our agency. So these positions will be used to do the critical work of oversight, technical assistance for these additional grant funds. We've doubled the number of sub-grantees that we oversee now. And so the staffing will be used to support the activities related to those activities. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Schmidt. Appreciate it. I know I have a question from Senator Harris, and then I believe I have a question from Assemblyman Watts. Senator Harris, go ahead, please. Maybe she's having technical difficulties again. Well, I think we can go to Assemblyman Watts, and then if she can't join, I have a question as well.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is related to the positions, and I noted that you realize this in some of the backups, but I was wondering if you could just walk us through a little bit more. So the overall length of the project could go into 2024. The positions are only budgeted through the end of FY23. That's when the grant provides funding for those positions. So could you just kind of walk us through that? And I think, do you see a continued need for those positions after the end of fiscal year 23? And if so, will you have the funding, and what would the funding source be to continue those positions after the grant funding ends?
Tina Schmidt for the record. So a couple things. We are using the allowable administrative expenditures within these funds. And so those will be available to us, like we said, through 2024. The positions are really being used right now. The critical need is to manage the current grant activities as well as these grants. I'm sure you're all aware with the coronavirus relief funds, the CARES relief funds, each one has to be tracked individually. So we currently have, while we have one community partner, for example, receiving 3 food grants, those food delivery grants each have to be tracked independently. And so it's really created quite a burden on our fiscal teams, as well as our grant management teams. So we anticipate using these positions now to handle this extra workload, and then evaluating that workload going forward. So if there's a no cost extension allowed with these funds or additional federal dollars coming, then the need obviously would continue within our agency, and we would request funding and allocate it accordingly in our next budget cycle. We would put that in the budget initiative, but we will be looking at the needs of each of these programs at that time to see if there's a need for them to continue. And that may be one, that may be all. It really depends on where we're at from a fiscal perspective come next biennium.
Thank you for that. And if I can just follow up briefly, Mr. Chair, I just want to, so that's helpful, but if those federal funds don't come in, then there's no other funding identified that would be able to continue those positions after these funds run out. Is that correct?
Tina Schmidt for the record. So the funds have not been identified to date, but we would be looking within our budget. We do cost allocate our positions across several accounts. And so we would be looking for opportunities. If the need with business need is still there, we would be looking at our current budget for opportunities to cost allocate amongst our current sources. And if not, we would be requesting potentially general funds going forward to support these positions.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question.
Thank you, Assemblyman. And my question is more about the community partners and sub-grantees, and what your plan looks like on how you're going to distribute this federal funding to those partners.
Tina Schmidt for the record. So these funds really are additional funds for the same services we currently provide and grant out to the community. So we will be doing a competitive award out to the community partners to provide the services that are allowable within the Older Americans Act funding.
So do you imagine this is just going to leverage current programs that you have with current community partners, but they're going through a competitive process to expand their, maybe not expand their scope, but continue or grow their scope?
Tina Schmidt for the record. So I think we're always looking for new partners and additional partnerships within the community. One of the things we've done a wonderful job during the pandemic is our community partners have really learned to collaborate with one another. And so during our competitive process, we're always looking for new ideas, new and innovative ways to reach the communities that have not been able to be reached during the COVID pandemic. So it's not so much, it would be additional resources for some of our current providers, but we would hope to have additional providers and additional innovative ideas on how to meet the needs of the community.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from any other members for Ms. Schmidt on this item? All right, I do not see any. So I would take a motion to approve item F53, that work program.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Vice Chair Carlton made a motion. Senator Dennis made a second. Any discussion on that motion from the members? All right, I see none. So all in favor, aye. Okay, thank you. Any opposed, nay? And Senator Harris, I know you're still having some video issues. Could you either raise your hand or verbally give me a yes? I have a text yes, and so I'll have to, because she's having technical difficulties right now. So I will see if that counts with staff, but all the members present, it passes unanimously with all the members present. And we can move on to our next item. So that was item 53, and we can move on to item 71. And item 71, we have with us, oh yeah, I'm sorry, item 71, we have Robert Thompson, who's the Deputy Administrator. And I believe we also have Ms. Swearingen with us from Welfare and Supportive Services, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Program, or TANF, and that's for item 71. And before we get into that, after item 71, and also item 73, then I wanted to take a lunch break, and then we can come back and finish the rest of our agenda. So we'll take item 71 and we'll take item 73, and then we'll take a 30-minute break, and then we will jump back into our agenda. Thank you, Vice Chair, for reminding me. I let that one slip. And let's start on item 71 then. And Mr. Thompson, if you are available, go right ahead.
Good afternoon. For the record, Robert Thompson, Deputy Administrator for the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services. I'm having some technical difficulties. Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you, Mr. Thompson.
Fantastic. So this work program is being presented to request authority to draw down just over $2.6 million into our TANF program. The Americans Rescue Act authorized additional funding for TANF programs into the Administration of Children and Families to award pandemic emergency assistance funds. Nevada was awarded approximately $6.8 million of these one-time assistance into our TANF program. Our TANF program is the program that provides cash welfare assistance to Nevadans who have children in the home and are in it's our smallest program for our constituents that are in deepest poverty. It's a work program. It is a poverty program and a need program for households with children. When we received the $6.8 million, there was specific restrictions on how it could be spent. It is a one-time assistance, and it could be used to provide non-reoccurrent short-term benefits to families with children. We met with our lawmakers and we met with community partners to discuss the best way to spend this money. The money expires September 22nd, September 30th of 2022. So we are able to spend it through 2 years. Originally, we had thought that we were going to split, do 50% of the money this year and 50% next year. But as this money rolled out, additional federal funds started coming to our families, and we saw our TANF caseload starting to drop significantly. For the first time in history. We got to some lows in the TANF program that we decided to use 40% of the money this year and 60% of the money next year. We had different opportunities that we could use these funds for, such as we could increase the TANF block grant for a small amount for a few months in a row. But when we do that and we talk about increasing monthly amounts, this money is budgetable in the food stamp program. And often when we give households additional money for 2, 3, 4 months, we have to start budgeting that money in the food stamp program. So we may give you $100 in TANF cash, but we are likely going to take $30 back out of the food stamp program, which did not seem like it would help these families. We met with lawmakers, we had discussions, and we decided a one-time benefit to go out approximately when school started. And we did the calculations and we determined that we could provide these children with approximately approximately 13,000 children, all children, not just school-age children, but all children on the TANF program, $185 one time. And at the same time, we had community partners reaching out to us and asking us if we could please pull out a small amount of this to augment diaper assistance in Nevada. And we agreed to request authority for $150,000 in diaper assistance, which would need to go out to RFA. A vendor has not been identified, but we would be using the money to augment a current program. We are not attempting to start a new program with $150,000. If there's any questions, I do have Lisa Swearinger, our policy chief, on the line also.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Do we have any questions from the members? I know I had one, I believe, from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. And if there's any others, please let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Thomas, for the presentation and for the conversations. You and I have talked about this issue and others concerning children and families in our communities. We know that there's monies coming into families that will drop off. So I appreciate the fact that you're utilizing or saving monies for when that other monies drop off. This can be a backstop to help those families. Can you just elaborate a little bit more of what the factors, what will those triggers be for the agency to consider when determining how and when to utilize that remaining 4.1 million in the TANF money?
So the Robert Thompson, for the record, the 4.1 million that will be set aside for next year, we will have to evaluate the need. We are anticipating that our caseloads will start to increase in January, knowing that families, or the majority of our families, are receiving the $250 a month or $300 a month per child for the current tax credit that is going out monthly. We attribute our significant caseload drop to those funds coming into those families. So we anticipate in January, those funds will stop and our caseload will start to increase. These funds are not anticipated for our normal caseload growth. We have our normal reserves for caseload growth. These funds would need to be used for a non-recurrent short-term benefit, and very likely our plan is to do the same thing next year as a one-time benefit when school starts, because we know when school starts, I know when school starts, the money that it costs for school supplies and things like that. And we have concerns of these families not being able to buy school supplies. So that's the intention, is to do the same thing next year. But if the caseload goes too far above what it was anticipated for, we may have to regroup, have conversations with you, our lawmakers, and the community to determine if we should shift that 4.1 million to a different non-reoccurrent short-term benefit. So I'm not sure, I don't think I answered your question, but I think the answer is we're not 100% sure at this time, but that is the plan, is to keep reevaluating and hopefully do the same thing next year that we did this year, unless something significant changes.
Flexible federal dollars.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. This is a moving target. We all know that. So I appreciate your honesty in the answer. And there is a plan. However, we have to be, we have to know that that plan may need to be adjusted as we move along, and especially in working with our community partners on this. I appreciate that. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question.
Thank you, Assemblywoman, and thank you, Mr. Thompson. Do we have any other questions from the committee members on item 71?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I did have a brief question about the diaper bank.
Oh, please go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you. So as far as the diaper bank goes, I know we had, you had mentioned in your previous comments that you were going to partner with folks that are already performing this. You would never think a diaper bank would be difficult to manage, but it is. I found that out about 2 years ago. So I'm assuming that you will refer people to your contractors, and this will only be for TANF recipients. Is that correct?
Robert Thompson, for the record, the $150,000 could only be used for households with children, which obviously would, yes, would have children that must meet the poverty level of TANF. They do not necessarily have to be on TANF. We could write that into the request if that's the suggestion on the table.
Flexibility, boo.
Historically, they have to meet a level of poverty. They don't necessarily need to be on TANF to utilize these types of funds.
Do you understand that?
And my concern is that doing income verification for folks can make the application more complicated and take a little bit longer. And I know through experience, when someone shows up at our front door and needs diapers for the baby, it's because they need diapers, and you don't want to have to make them wait. And you're going to know who your
Why not just have the diapers
are.
go through the WIC program?
Letting them
Why
know
just
where
not
they can
go through a program
rather
that's
than
already
keep-
established?
Otherwise, they're not
You
going to
can't
know
do
this
that.
benefit is
You have
available.
to just
They're not
give
gonna know where
somebody
to go get it.
another
It's
pot of
something
money to
new.
take care of their family,
So
right?
I'm
No,
hoping we
this
can
is
communicate
bullshit.
with the current clients to make sure that they understand.
WIC for family
And please write
needs.
very good criteria. So any folks out there that
Any program
want
that's
to
operating
provide this
regarding
service to the folks that are already helping
dollars.
know exactly what the roadmap is and what type of documents that they'll need to be able to provide the service.
Understand.
I know we have gone really far with our particular, the couple of organizations I've worked with, helping them set up diaper banks. We just need to have clear guidelines to make sure that we do it the way you'd like us to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And do we have any other questions or comments from any of the members on this item? All right. I do not see any. I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Thompson and Ms. Swearingen. You guys are on the front lines of providing help and aid to Nevadans that need it the most at a time that has to have, well, is historically the worst. And so I appreciate everything that you've done for Nevadans who've suffered through these economic times that we're in, and continue to suffer. And you guys out there, you folks out there are on the front lines, and we appreciate your work. All right, so seeing none, I would take a motion to, or seeing no other comments or questions, I would take a motion to approve this item.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton to approve item F71, that work program. And I have a second from Senator Dennis. Any discussions on that motion? All right, I don't see any, so all in favor, aye. And all opposed, nay. And so motion passes unanimously. And we can move on to our next item. I still am like ingrained to try to assign a floor statement to someone every time I say that. All right, so that moves us on to item 73. And with us, we have to present that. We have Deputy Administrator Chappell, and I believe we have Ms. Askew as well from Welfare and Supportive Services, Child Assistance and Development. And if you could walk us through a work program C55307, which is F73.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Margaret Chappell, and I serve as the Deputy Administrator of Field Operations Support for the Division of Welfare and Supportive Services. With me this morning is Social Services Chief Christelle Askew, who's responsible for our Child Care Development Program.
Oh, that must be
Agenda item number 73 is requesting authority in an unprecedented amount for this program of $222,425,189 in Federal American Rescue Plan Act funds. We plan to use it to invest in child care stabilization grant funds,
Child care stabilization
provide
grants. What does that look like?
technical assistance and professional development to child care providers, families
Understand.
seeking child care and systems change. I'll turn it over to Christelle to provide an overview and answer questions. Thank you.
Please, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This is Christelle Askew, Chief of the Child Care Program for the
Knew
record.
she was Black.
The field of child care has many challenges. Child care providers run on an extremely thin margin, especially home-based providers.
Well,
And
what's
as a
early
result,
head start all
child
about?
care staff often learn a comparatively low wage. And yet we have very high expectations of the staff and providers to produce high quality care. Providers haven't been able to increase their income because it would be at the expense of families who already can't afford child care.
Did you hear
and
that?
Sometimes when
No
families are
Head
struggling to
Start?
pay, the providers
Really?
waive the cost.
What is the
fact
500
is,
seats
many
that they
providers
want to
didn't start
put
up
in the
their child
preschool
care to be
programs?
business owners.
500
They're in it to work with the
scholarships.
children. So we're here today to talk about solutions to some of these challenges in the form of a one-time infusion
One-time
of ARP
infusion,
Child Care
really?
Stabilization Grant funds, of which 90% must go directly to child care providers to support their businesses.
90%. To who?
That is a federal requirement of these funds.
Wow.
And states are encouraged to allot at least 6 months of operating costs.
For
We're
brand new
utilizing our
facilities.
child care resource and referral partners, the Children's Cabinet and the Urban League, to disseminate the funds
Oh, the
directly
Urban
to
League?
eligible child care providers.
And children,
For the
something else.
remaining 10% of the funds, states are encouraged to essentially reimagine and restructure the child care industry,
Reimagine, understand
and
what
also
we're
to
saying
increase
here.
its
And
capacity.
restructure without you coming
As
to
we
the table.
continue to
My
develop our
Negro
capacity
family,
building project, our
where
plan
are
is to
you?
target underserved
Not at the table.
populations and child care deserts with a focus on recruitment of home-based providers and micro centers.
Micro centers, you know.
are childcare sites
Joan Ebert
developed
had
within
anybody
existing
with $1 million
establishments to meet
matching
families where
funds.
they're at.
But guess what? I don't think they're trying to do matching
In
funds
order to
anymore.
restructure the child care industry in Nevada,
Restructure
we are
it in
proposing to
Nevada.
strengthen and align child care
Who's
systems,
going to be talking?
including alignment of policies,
Who's going to be
regulations,
sharing the
data
concept
systems,
ideals?
and
Not
the
you,
creation
boo.
of a child
Where
care
are
network
you?
hub that crosses all child care sectors and tailors services to individual provider needs. As an example, for home-based providers, services will include funding toward technology advancements. shared services,
Technology
and business
advances. Oh,
training.
their
While
home-based
all
providers are going to be
provider
able to
types will
buy
receive workforce
technology
support
for their
and assistance
centers
with capacity building.
with this
For example,
federal
small
dollars.
modifications or equipment.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is to help existing and newly recruited
Existing
providers get the
and
business
new
piece of child care.
innovative providers.
Some of the services we are implementing have been shown to result in a decrease in administrative burden, an increase in revenue, and significant cost savings to providers. Essentially, we're helping providers do business in a more efficient and sustainable way.
Oh, really? What about the
Additionally,
people
to
who
build
would
a
be qualifying
comprehensive
for
child
these
care hub
services?
across all sectors, we're targeting existing programs in Nevada that need funding
Only
to
existing
support them to
programs
become
who
more
need
robust,
services,
like the Teach
222,000.
Scholarship Program and the
Yeah,
local early
scholarships.
childhood advisory councils, and an expansion of the
Teaching
Nevada
scholarships.
Youth
Oh,
First
scholarships
pilot.
again.
And I want to quickly touch on a few things before we take questions. First, I would like to clarify that the Child Care and Development Program does not do direct services.
Does
So
not
we will
do
be
direct
utilizing
services.
our
You
existing
understand that?
partners, The Children's Cabinet and the Urban League,
Mhm.
who are already in the community providing
They're
support. and have a
already in the
trusted
community.
relationship With providers and families.
Yes. already
However,
providing
our
services.
office is
But they're
involved
not
in
getting
all of
to
the
your
projects
people.
at a development and
Understand
implementation
who's
level.
not getting
And we will be
served.
conducting an evaluation of
The
all
people who
projects
are
and
not
vendors to ensure these
being
projects meet the desired
represented
outcomes.
are on the menu.
In summary, this proposal includes funding in the amount of $217.9 million toward provider supports in the form of grants for operating costs and the establishment of systems to support the business of childcare and capacity growth. $4.3 million in family supports, including an analysis to restructure the childcare subsidy program, a robust outreach program to get families involved, and the community health worker program to reduce disparities in healthcare access and to facilitate a connection to other resources and services. $190,000 for system supports in the form of grants to local early childhood advisory councils and establish pilot projects aimed at increasing capacity, quality, and access based on the needs of local communities. Additionally, we've been allotted over $4 million in ongoing funding toward our base childcare fund. Lastly, I want to let you know that Margot Chappell, our Deputy Administrator, would like to wrap up with some additional information after we take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we have quite a few questions. This is an enormous amount of money to go towards this one activity, incredibly important. And I have seen firsthand and had conversations both in this capacity and in my professional and personal capacity that one of the biggest roadblocks to recovery and expansion of our economy is childcare, and
understand why
I'm
African American
grateful that
people are
the federal
not
government
enrolled in
identified
childcare
that,
programs.
and we
Just
fought for
understand
that, and
Siberia.
getting some of this $6-point-something billion that's come into our state and this amount of money, because I do not see how we make a recovery unless we really look at childcare and what that does to Nevada working families. And so I think I will start off with, and I think I have several questions, but I just want to see what some of the other members address. But I think I have Assemblywoman Miller up first.
Come on, Brittany.
And then I believe I had Assemblywoman Peters after that. But Assemblywoman Miller, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair. My question is, if you could please provide, well, it's not really a question, but if you could provide and discuss in detail the timeline, the exact timeline for the application and distribution for each of the proposed rounds for this provider stabilization grant.
Absolutely. This is Christelle Askew for the record. So the way we intend to push these out, round one will be our family, friend, and neighbor providers, and those will be rolling out in September. And round two will begin rolling out for family childcare providers that are licensed, our centers and our out of school time providers. Those will be rolling out in October.
October.
Follow up, Chair.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. And so when you say September and October, can you give us some specific target dates? Because we know that this is imperative for everyone in the community and all of these partners to know the exact dates of when everything will be due and when they can anticipate that decisions will be made, and of course the actual disbursement of funds. So September's pretty vague when it comes to grant applications. Do you have some specific dates already identified?
This is Christelle Askew for the record. By the last day of September, September 30th, we will have the notice of funding opportunity and the applications posted and available for the family, friend, and neighbor providers. And by October 31st, the last day of October, we will have the applications online and ready. And the notice of funding opportunity will have already been posted for all of the providers prior to that.
And will there be information prior to that to let everyone know that this is intended, that this will happen? So, because if we say by September 30th, it's kind of like I'm catching it behind. Will there be announcements before to prepare people that this is coming?
It's on its way.
So this is Krista Lasky for the record. We've had several town hall meetings
But
to
you
discuss the
weren't
fact
there,
that these
Brittany.
grants will be coming out. The notice of funding opportunity will be posted by September 30th, but the actual rollout of the grants will go well into the next calendar year. So it is our assumption that there will be plenty of time to identify and allow application for all providers over a period of time. But for the first round, which are our family, friend, and neighbor providers, those are already registered with the Urban League and the Children's Cabinet. So we've already identified those
Yeah, it's
providers.
already what you've already
And so
done.
the outreach to them will
Yeah,
be
that are not
a
accepting
little
our
quicker and
children. So let's get
easier
real.
to get those
How
rolled
they
out.
helping African-American children who are generating the funds? I just would like to know.
Okay,
that.
thank you. Thank you, Chair Brooks.
How they creating access for all.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And I believe we have Assemblywoman Peters up next.
Thank you, Chair. My question has to do with your, let's see, the sub-grants to our community-based organizations. Can you talk a little bit about what the eligibility requirements would be for those community-based organizations to apply for those sub-grants?
This is Krista Lasky for the record. So we will be putting out a request for application.
A request for a
And we will
proposal.
require that nonprofits, they have to be a nonprofit to apply. And then the outcomes would be that they will be able to connect with the community, not only to help them learn about the grants that are available to them, but all of the services that are available. And over time to also incorporate recruitment of providers toward the subsidy program and to access the grants.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up thought, I will be curious to see how much interest you get from the different regions of the state with regard, and especially to this particular piece. So I look forward to seeing how that ends up breaking down.
I want to see the rollout too. I haven't seen the rollout in
This is
any
Krista.
public.
I'll ask you,
services.
thank you for the question.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Peters, and thank you, Ms. Askew. I believe Senator Dondero Loop has a question as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, what are the expected benefits to the providers of that unified information system? And what's the timeline of that new system?
It's a new system.
This is Krista Lasky for the record. So in terms of the benefits, there are basically three parts to the $3.9 million toward these activities. With the Wonder School proposal, what they do is they help the provider with the business side of childcare, including licensing, website creation for marketing, and they implement technology that helps streamline billing and maximizes enrollment, and essentially managing all of the things needed to operate a profitable, high-quality early childhood program.
That's what they're doing.
And that is a pilot that we intend to expand out. In terms of the KIP and PIN project, that project is to go and identify providers in the community that we know are currently serving children that are not at this time registered or regulated in any way, and wrap them into services, all of the services that we have available, training, our child care hub, and just to make sure that they have supplies and resources that they need. And then the third piece, the hub itself, is to bring all of the various projects
to establish a program
and vendors
Wow.
together
What are you
under
doing
one
now?
hub so that we can work together as a team to reduce duplication and streamline all of the services.
Wow.
And in terms of the timeline,
As soon as we have authority over the funds, our intention is to amend the subawards with these funds.
As soon as you get the money.
Most of the projects are going to kick off pretty quickly. The Wonder School project, they intend to start with their outreach and recruitment immediately. And then they'll have the technology implemented in November or December of this calendar year.
Oh, wow, how exciting.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. You had touched on a few of the other items, including workforce
development,
workforce recruitment and retention. And I think I'm gonna have some questions on that as well, but I know Assemblywoman Gorlow does.
Yes, thank you, Chair Book. I do have a quick question about the $1,000 wage incentive. How would the eligibility for the wage incentive be determined? What is the timeline for the distribution of the incentive?
This is Christelle Askew for the record. So the application for the wages for staff will be embedded in the Nevada Registry website. The Nevada Registry will be vetting all of the applicants through an application process to ensure they are currently working as childcare staff in the community. And that's how they will be vetted. Also, additionally, they will be vetted through the providers themselves. They'll be reaching out to the providers to ensure that they are currently employed that way as well, as a second way to vet them. And then the timeline would be October of this calendar year to have those checks go out to staff.
Thank you. And if I could do a quick follow-up, Chair. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what that vetting process looks like? I know we've had some fraud in other areas.
Oh, have
could
you?
you just explain a little bit how that might,
really?
what might be done to help prevent that fraud?
I have no idea.
This is Christelle Askew for the record. So the Nevada Registry is actually a system that tracks early childhood staff throughout the state. So they, in order to be registered, they must be on the early childhood career ladder. So they would be on that ladder. And then additionally, the staff from the Nevada Registry will be contacting the childcare providers to ensure they have a current list of all active staff. Additionally, they have to self-attest on their application that they are currently working, although we're going to be vetting that. And also that they aren't currently receiving unemployment.
Unemployment.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. My question is, the bulk of this particular bucket, 12.8 million, I believe $12.8 million are going to these one-time payments, wage incentives to register childcare staff. Is there going to be, do you have a plan for measuring the success of retention or expansion by doing that? Is there a metric that you're going to use that says, yeah, this helped? I mean, obviously that money is going to help those folks who are working in that field, but if our position is that this is meant for recruitment and retention, is there going to be a way that you're going to be able to measure success of this?
Why would there be?
This is Christelle Askew for the record. That is a great question. We intend on evaluating all of these projects to ensure that the outcomes that are desired do manifest. And we will be looking at those staff to identify whether or not we were able to retain them over time.
Please do.
Thank you.
Everything.
And I just had another question. I shouldn't say it's final one because other members might have questions, but it's in regard to, sorry, I'm trying to make sure that make sure that everyone has the ability to have a question here, or get their questions answered. It really was around the community health worker pilot program. But before I do that, I want to make sure I give the opportunity to Assemblywoman Titus had a question, as well as Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Assemblywoman Titus, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mine really is kind of piggybacking on what you asked about how do you document the success of making sure that this program indeed expands access to childcare. And I'm wondering, where are you with the data of what's the void? How many more childcare facilities do we need in the state? How many students potentially?
I don't know. Where's your
of the,
census data? We're not
pre-K
doing that.
kids could potentially have a childcare access? Where are we lacking? Do you have a number on that?
Oh, no.
And what the goal is with this
We
program?
don't know. Nothing.
This is Christelle asking for the record, and that's another great question.
It's a
I
great
don't have those
question.
numbers at my fingertips, but I would be happy to get back with you with that data.
Back to you.
Because I think, again, we have to measure what we're doing with this money, and if indeed, if it is successful. And then again, about increasing money and employees, what's the average wage? Do you have any idea of a person working in this industry at this time?
This is Christelle asking for the record. It is my understanding that most staff are paid below $15 an hour. It is my understanding that the average pay is $10 an hour.
So we were
$10 an
looking,
hour.
one of the goals here is number one,
Make
there's
it
not enough
15?
employees, as was mentioned earlier, not just for this industry, but across the spectrum. So what is your goal then? How will you measure success? Will you look at what their salaries are increased if we do this, and how will you be able to do that?
This is Christelle asking for the record. As stated earlier, we will be evaluating all of these projects for success in terms of retention of staff and how their wages are impacted. There is a piece of the operating cost grant which requires 20% of the operating cost grant funding to go towards staff. And they can use those funds to temporarily increase the wage to those staff.
Did I hear you mention before that this is really only to the non-profit programs that are out there, and none of the other child care facilities are eligible for this?
These operating cost grants are going out to family, friend, and neighbor providers. All licensed family child care providers are also eligible. All licensed child care centers are eligible aside from Head Start. And out of school time programs are also eligible.
Great, thanks for that clarity, and thank you for the question, Mr. Chair.
Not eligible for this money.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Up next, I believe we have
Wonder
Assemblywoman
why.
Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as I was looking over our notes, I see that the sub-grantee will be Children's Cabinet, which is in Northern Nevada. And I was just wondering, what is their relationship with the Southern Nevada community? I know we have a large population of children here and of childcare facilities. And as we look at the community health workers, what's that connection? What's their connection to Southern Nevada, and how will they work together to make sure that we're addressing the issues with childcare both in the north, the south, and in our rural communities?
This is Christelle asking for the record. The Children's Cabinet, they actually function statewide, and they have locations in the north and the south. Historically, the Children's Cabinet has done a lot of work with the Child Care and Development Fund for quality activities throughout the state. At this time, we're intending to pilot the community health workers in the north and the south. However, it will be the Children's Cabinet that facilitates the hiring process.
Community health worker.
For the community health.
Is a new term for a job. It's going to be a $15 an hour job.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a follow-up, but I'll follow up offline.
Well, I have a follow-up on that as well. And so, and this might be a question that we'll have to research offline as well, but how do we ensure that on all of these things, but also on the community health worker program and anything else that we're getting just the disbursement of funds, but resources, human and otherwise, are across the state proportional to the need, and how do we, what's the accountability metric there? And so I think that might lead me to my final request when we're done with this item, but I think that's going to be incredibly important, and because quite frankly, we've seen it out of nonprofits, state agencies, this legislature. We're continuously disproportionately funding Nevadans where the need isn't the greatest. And so and underfunding Nevadans where the need is the greatest. And so this is an opportunity for us to maybe try to be a little bit more thoughtful on geographically, or not geographically, but need-based funding of sending humans into those communities as well as the money. So that being said, do we have any other questions from any of the other members on this item? I do not see any. So before we go to ask for a motion, I think that what we need to do, this is a large amount of money, and a lot of the moving parts on how this will get distributed leave me with a little bit of concern, and that's no criticism whatsoever of the agency. It's just that there's a lot of sub-grantees and community partners and things that are going on that I think we need some transparency and accountability to make sure that money is going to best use and getting distributed where it needs to be and should be distributed. So I would like to entertain a motion from and if Assemblywoman Moreno, if you are open to making the motion, I would like to have a motion to approve these items, this item, but with the requirement for the division to provide quarterly status reports to IFC,
because they don't have what is
on
this
the
IFC
expenditures
and
of
they
American
don't
Rescue
have
Plan Act
any
Child Care
reports right now.
Stabilization Grant funds, because
These are
given
federal
the
dollars.
activities, the variety of activities to be supported by this level of significant level of funding. So I would move to I'd like to see a motion to approve this funding, but with that reporting mechanism in
We're gonna
place.
put the reporting mechanism so it looks
Thank
wonderful.
you,
but
Mr.
it's
Chair.
not.
This is Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno, and I will make that motion with the edits that we have the quarterly reporting back to IFC.
Well, where's the initial reporting? I'd like to know.
And
It
do I have a
doesn't
second?
exist. Bullshit.
So I have a motion from Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno and a second from Senator
I have to
Dennis.
look at
Do you have any
IFC in
discussion
there.
on that motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, aye. And all opposed, nay. And motion passes unanimously. And we can move on to our next item. Oh, we can move on to lunch. Sorry, I saw the look of just utter disappointment and terror on everyone's face. So thank you again for reminding me. I'm in a different time zone right now, so my stomach is on. My stomach is on a different time zone as well, so I apologize. All right, so let's take, it is now 12:48. And if we could take a 30-minute break and let's get back here at exactly 1:20, and we can finish our work for the day. And so I'll see everyone in 32 minutes. And please don't be tardy.
I guess they went to lunch. Gonna have to pause the recording. Stepped out for a second. Oh, stop the share. And we need to, I'm gonna end this. Yeah, it's been 3 hours. End.